Hey everybody, we're back here at Red Rocks Racing Sportsbook for the Sports Betting Podcast Bookends. And yes, we are back and it's a fun time, Jay. I mean, you think about the college basketball tournament, free agency, baseball starting, NBA and NHL seasons winding down, NASCAR in Vegas. I mean, big golf tournament going on. It's a fun time of year to be talking. And let's start with football, though. I think when you look at football season and we talk about it, football season never ends. And we know we're still heading to the draft in April, but this free agency frenzy has been crazy. I mean, from the time it started, big name guys on the move, big signings, a lot of trades. And what do we look at? Like when we look at the future book and, you know, what teams we're going to move up or down, I think a lot is based on who they sign and who they lose.
Yeah, I mean, clearly when you're talking about Super Bowl odds or odds to win the AFC or the NFC, a lot of it is quarterback-based and quarterback-driven.
The whole league's quarterback-driven,
and so when we see these moves, when you see Darno leaving the Vikings and heading to Seattle and Geno Smith from Seattle to the Raiders, while they're significant for those teams, you don't see a major change in the odds to win the Super Bowl because it's not occurring with teams that are at the top of those odds boards, where it's the Chiefs, the Bills, the Ravens, the Eagles. Those teams are your favorites in that Super Bowl index pool, and some of these teams are deep in the 40, 50, 60, 70 to 1. And when you go from a mid-tier quarterback to potentially another mid-tier quarterback, or even it might be a little bit of an upgrade from what you had the year before, it's not changing the entire dynamic of where they're at. They're still a 50 or 60 to 1 team based on that quarterback. Now, we do see times when individual players will maybe move a game line. If a quarterback is out or a wide receiver is out, you'll see a game maybe move a point or a point and a half. Obviously, a quarterback, you could see an individual game move 5.5, 6, 7 points. The future books from a 1 and 2 player type of acquisition don't move the needle all that much. A Devontae Adams, going to the Rams, but the departure of Cooper Kupp is kind of offset by that. Does that really move something? Now, the Rams specifically, we did move, but it wasn't so much because of that acquisition. It's because the Niners had such a departure of the guys that are going. And you look at the Eagles with the defensive departures. And so as much as we talk about cluster injuries, when we talk about free agents, it's which teams have picked up multiple free agents, or which teams have signed a bunch of their potential free agents and they're keeping them. And so they've locked up 3, 4, 5 guys, or look what the Bears have been able to do on their offensive line, what the Vikings have been able to do with their defensive front. Those type of things might have more of a cluster into the odds change. But the moves that we saw this past week didn't have a whole monster effect on the future book odds, as well as us as the odds makers also anticipated some of these moves. And so we knew what the Steelers were potentially looking at doing. We knew what Seattle was looking at doing. We're expecting the Raiders to do these things. Didn't expect the Colts to go out and sign Daniel Jones. I
think that speaks volumes of where they think they're at with Anthony Richardson. But I think you talk about the Steelers, and great move to get DK Metcalf, but right now, you and I are throwing him the ball. I mean, what are they going to do? I think they had hoped for Justin Fields. He takes the bigger deal with the Jets. Do they ultimately bring back Russell Wilson or not? And you're right. I think you look at all these teams, and had Myles Garrett got traded, I think to maybe he had talked about maybe the Bills. That would have moved the needle, I think, for a top-notch team. The Bengals are, to me, a huge enigma now because they've waited too long to kind of sign their big free agents. They said they wanted to keep them. They still haven't locked up Chase yet. In their own words, we're going to make him the highest paid wide receiver in football. They haven't yet. T. Higgins now.
Well, and specifically the Bengals, the weight has caused the problem. You're watching all these guys get paid money, and Max Crosby gets that money. Garrett gets that money. Now Trey Hendrickson is out of your price range. Whereas if you would have paid him before Crosby gets paid, before Garrett gets paid, you might have been able to sign him. But now after those guys get the big money, and Hendrickson has stats even better than what they've done, you're not going to be able to sign him for the dollars you could have gotten before those signings.
That becomes the interesting
Same thing with the Cowboys. A little bit as well.
If Micah Parsons does get moved, or Trey Hendrickson, or T. Higgins, depending on where they go, maybe it does move the needle a little bit. To me, this is one of the questions. I mean, what teams did it maybe move the needle on a little bit? I think the Commanders. We know how good of a season they had with Jaden Daniels, and you've got a really good receiver in Terry McLaurin. But to go out and get Deebo Samuel adds a lot to that offense. Kingsbury and the Commanders last year led the league in screen passes. You pick up a guy like Deebo Samuel who excels in that. Offensive line, which I'm really stunned. The Texans could not protect C.J. Stroud last year. He got hit almost as many times as the Bears, as Caleb Williams did, and they trade Larry Tunsil. So I think you look at the Commanders, they've added two really good pieces where the Cowboys haven't really helped themselves. You talked about a lot of departures for the Eagles. The Giants are in a total rebuild. The Commanders helped themselves. I think the Bears, both sides, the trenches, they helped themselves. The Vikings, defensive line, they helped themselves. And I'm scratching my head, though, in the NFC West. The Niners, I mean, every time you look up, they are letting a player go. They've got an aging running back in McCaffrey. They've got a quarterback they still have to lock up. They talked about reuniting the Bosa brothers together. That didn't happen because Joey's going to play in Buffalo right now. And in Seattle's case, maybe you're right. Maybe it's just you subtract Geno Smith and you add Sam Darnold. The difference is Sam Darnold doesn't have DK Metcalf or Tyler Lockett right now. So to me, the Rams getting Devontae Adams are now the best team in the NFC West.
Well, and we're only seeing, call it, 75% of the puzzle that these teams are building right now. We're in that free agency mode, and you're going to finish the rest of this puzzle when you see the draft. So some of these teams are positioning themselves for who they like in the drafts, what they're going to target in the drafts, and that's why they're able to make these moves of releasing certain players, looking at freeing up some cap space to go after other guys.
I'm going to interrupt you a bit because I think the difference this year, though, and I agree that a lot of teams would look to do that, but last year you looked at 6 quarterbacks that went in the first round, all guys that started either day one or pretty early in the season, except Penix, who started later in the season, and then you had the injury to J.J. McCarthy. But the wide receiver class last year, where you had Marvin Harrison Jr. and you had Adunze and you had Malik Neighbors, you had star power. This year, I mean, Cam Ward he's a good prospect, but I don't know if he starts day one. Sanders has been dropping a little bit. You talk about Jackson Dart, maybe Jalen Milroe, and these receivers there might not be a receiver that goes in the top 10, where you had 3 that went in the top 8 last year. So it is a different class as far as some of these skill position players go. And what are the Steelers going to do at quarterback? What are the Giants going to do at quarterback? There's some major question marks. The Titans right now, that Aaron Rodgers, Russell Wilson, where are they going to go? But it's a quarterback-driven league, and you've got teams right now that don't have a quarterback.
Yeah, you talked about it. Aaron Rodgers, again, what he's got left in the tank, where does he go? Kirk Cousins is the other kind of big name out there that can solidify a team for another year or two while they look for that piece of the puzzle to add him from a quarterback standpoint.
Atlanta keeps saying they want to hold on to him. He is due March 16th a $10 million roster bonus if he's there. If you're a team like Cleveland or Pittsburgh or the Giants, you have to look at this guy to say, is he available and what's it going to take to get him? It's obvious Atlanta has moved on to Michael Penix. I don't get why they want to hold on to him and potentially pay a $10 million roster bonus and that big salary. I think now that the dust has kind of settled, and depending what Aaron Rodgers ultimately does and Russ, if he's available, one of these teams has to go out and get him, I would think. But it's going to be interesting. I mean, we have moved a couple of teams up and down, but really the Rams to me, the Vikings, the Bears, the Commanders, all really have helped themselves. Cowboys haven't really done anything what they've talked about. I think other teams in that division have gotten better. But to me, the 49ers and Seahawks have really dropped. And for my money, the Rams and Cardinals are the 2 top teams in the NFC West. All right, we've talked a little football, and keep checking it out because there's still going to be a lot more movement, and who knows? Maybe the Cowboys don't sign Parsons.
There was one question about what was the most surprising addition, or
right? Yeah,
you had one surprise. Was there anything that jumped out at you of somebody that did something? Or
well, to me, it's the Steelers going out and getting DK Metcalf. They've never been like a throwing team under Tomlin. And now you don't have a quarterback. I love their skill position players. I mean, you've got good receivers now in Pickens and DK Metcalf and Freiermuth at tight end and a young running back in Jalen Warren. They let Najee Harris go to the Chargers. But who's going to be throwing them the ball? And if it's the draft, I mean, are they going to target Sanders or Jackson Dart or Milroe? They've talked about bringing back Mason Rudolph in a backup role, but you don't have a quarterback right now. It's a head-scratcher to me that they didn't lock up Russ or Justin Fields after they made the trade for DK Metcalf. So that's the team for me right now that I just don't get the move without a quarterback and kind of going away from what their kind of ground and pound has been. But I get it. You're in a division with Joe Burrow and Lamar Jackson. You needed more firepower, but they need a quarterback really bad.
There was two for me, and I won't go in depth in the Browns. I don't have any understanding of what occurred with the Myles Garrett signing, of him saying, I'm leaving, I want to be traded.
Money.
And then the Browns paid him all the money, and he stays there. Again, it doesn't move the needle because I don't think the Browns are a team that's ready to be competitive, considering what the Ravens and Bengals are in the division. So he gets a bunch of money, but are the Browns really a team that can win now? The one that was exciting are exciting for me, and I felt like the Tampa Bay Buccaneers potentially have the steal signing of the free agency season is getting Chris Godwin at the price that they got him at. I mean, you talked about the lack of wide receiver depth in the draft. To be able to get Godwin and keep him with a Mike Evans, and now with the development of Jalen McMillan when Godwin was hurt last year. I mean, Godwin, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers were 7-1 to start the season last year. They ended the season on a 4-6 run. We saw at the end of the year what Evans was able to do. I think McMillan had 7 touchdown passes, catches in their last 7 games. Now you add Godwin back to that offense with obviously Mike Evans and McMillan and Cade Otton, who also kind of developed when Godwin went out. Baker Mayfield threw for 4,500 yards last year. That was third in the league behind Burrow and Goff. He threw for 41 touchdown passes. That was good for second in the league behind Burrow, who threw for 43, and Lamar Jackson who threw for 41. And now you're adding Chris Godwin back into that offense for 10 games, even if he's not the same Chris Godwin or healthy. But I mean, adding an Evans, on a McMillan and Otton, Bucky Irving, that offense is dynamic, and that division is somewhat
open,
soft, and so a Buccaneers for me, what a signing. If they stay healthy, and from a fantasy standpoint, Baker Mayfield might be that sleeper guy that. Don't be interested in Evans or Godwin or McMillan or Otton. Just go get Mayfield and get them all. But the Bucs, to me, what a great sign to be able to keep Godwin, and he gives them a huge hometown discount to stay, because he probably could have got
left a lot of money on the table.
A lot more money by willing to go somewhere else.
My only concern with Tampa is that 2 years ago, Canellis was the offensive coordinator. He leaves to become the head coach at Carolina. So Baker Mayfield loses his offensive coordinator. Last year, it's Liam Cohen, who does a great job with that offense. He leaves to become the head coach of the Jacksonville Jaguars. So he's on his third offensive coordinator
I think
now.
Baker Mayfield might be on his 6th or 7th offensive coordinator.
I mean, in 3 years,
because
he's on his third.
If you go back to the Browns, I don't think he had the same offensive coordinator there in any of years. He might be actually on an offensive coordinator every year of his career. So nothing new.
I think it has a little bit of an
Mayfield.
impact. We've seen other quarterbacks take that step back. Now, from a skill position player and talent, they're definitely loaded. There's no question at all. But I think it's interesting. I mean, we could talk football for hours, and we have been for the last several days.
You talked about one of the other ones for me, the Minnesota Vikings. I thought they've done a great job. They get Jonathan Allen, a defensive tackle from the Commanders. They re-sign Byron Murphy, cornerback, so they keep him in-house. And then they pick up 2 guards from the Colts, Freeze and Ryan Kelly, Pro Bowl center from the Colts. So again, they're making all the preparations to have J.J. McCarthy be their starter, solidifying that offensive line, adding to that defensive front, and again, probably the most competitive division in football, with obviously what the Lions, Packers, Bears, and Vikings. But I like what the Vikings had done, and the money that they spent, I think, was well-spent money.
Yeah, they had talked about maybe franchising Sam Darnold or bringing him back. It just didn't make any sense. They had hoped to keep Darnold or Daniel Jones. Daniel Jones leaves, what you alluded to earlier, with the Colts, where he's going to compete maybe for a starting job or be that veteran behind Richardson. But I think the Vikings, they're all in on J.J. McCarthy, and that is a really good division. The Packers really haven't done a lot to improve themselves yet. The Lions are a little bit of a question mark. We know from a talent standpoint and the head coach of Campbell, they're really, really good, but you lose both coordinators, so we'll see how that impacts them and where ultimately, some of the injuries on defense, where they're at with that. I think the Bears and Vikings both really improved there. So keep an eye on all these moves in football, win totals, things are going to be adjusted based on all this stuff, but they're clearly not done as deals become official today, and then we'll see like Cooper Kupp to be released, where he ultimately goes. Cowboys, Chargers, Patriots, where he goes to maybe help some teams there. We're going to kind of jump from football now to college basketball, and it's yay, college basketball tournament time. I mean, March Madness is always a fun time, and we love it. The crowd's in the room, the atmosphere, the hype. I mean, it's just a different vibe. Everybody's here early. They stay late. It's the David against Goliath matchups. People are having a great time. And, of course, we bring back our last man standing contest. But tournament time really is a fun time, I know, for our side of the counter, and I believe for you guys as well.
Yeah, and these March Madness doesn't start March 20th when we talk about the tournament. These conference tournaments that we have upcoming are absolutely fantastic basketball, and you get to see kind of a preview show to maybe what you're going to see come tournament time. And I look back to last year, and I want to specifically call out NC State in the ACC tournament last year. NC State was the number 10 seed in the ACC tournament. They were the 10th ranked team at the end of the regular season in the ACC, went on to win the ACC conference tournament,
it was fun to watch.
And then ended up in the Final Four, losing to Purdue in the Final Four. So again, crazy things can happen. Those stretch runs. We talk about the Cinderellas every single year, these small conference teams. So now's the time. If you're not familiar with some of these teams, this week you get to watch on ESPN, on ESPN2, on ESPNU, some of these smaller conferences. Get yourself familiar with some of these smaller conferences that you haven't been able to watch, so that you know who these teams are come that March 20th, 21st date. Specifically the ACC tournament as we go into this year, three of the hottest teams in the country. Duke, obviously the number 1 seed on a 8-game winning streak. Clemson, number 10 seed, on a 8-game winning streak, and Louisville, who's the number 13 team in the country, on a 9-game winning streak. Again, not a lot of depth in the ACC. Those 3 teams might be the only 3 ACC teams to get in. North Carolina, currently a bubble team. But again, I think this is an interesting one to watch, those 3 teams at the top. And again, we saw last year the number 10 team in the ACC who would have not made the tournament. They get an 11 seed by winning the tournament, and then they go make the Final Four, in that tournament. So something to be said here. Watch that ACC tournament. Some great teams at the top, but I think that there's always going to be a sleeper that could potentially come out of there and make their way into the tournament.
Well, I think you talk about the conference play too. I mean, the Big Ten with Michigan State, Maryland, and Michigan. The Big West with UC San Diego, Irvine, and then of course the Southeast Conference with Auburn, Florida, Bama, and Tennessee. All are going to be really interesting. But one of the questions that came in was, what kind of surprises you this year? And to me, it's Rick Pitino and St. John's. I mean, he's got them on top now for the first time in 40 years. He just wins, and I want to see where ultimately they get seeded. I think you look at UConn now, and they were ranked 3rd going into the season. UConn's going to be a 9th or maybe 10 seed this year, depending on how they do in conference play. But St. John's, to me, is one of those real surprises, and I want to see what Rick Pitino does. The way they play, they shoot the 3, they defend like crazy, and just his influence on that team. For me, they're one of the biggest surprises in the country.
Yeah, a couple things for me. I think the conference realignment has been interesting to watch the Big Ten teams absorb the Pac-12 teams, knowing that cross-country play. Some interesting stuff there. The Big 12 adding Houston, adding BYU, Texas Tech, they've got some thunder there. You brought up the Big Ten, and one of the things for the Big Ten for me is they've got a lot of teams, again, between the Big Ten and the SEC, we're going to see the vast majority of those teams represented in the big tournament. The Big Ten, we see Michigan State is the number 7 seed. That's the highest ranked Big Ten team right now. Maryland 11, Wisconsin 18, Michigan 23, Illinois 21, Purdue 24, Oregon 23. So they've got a bunch of those mid-tier. Call it a bunch of teams in the teens and in the top 20, which for me is kind of knockout. Those are teams that get knocked out. Those are teams that get upset in the middle of the tournament. The big one for me is this SEC, because I've never seen the SEC have this much power. I mean, we're talking about Auburn, who's currently the number 3 seed, Florida the 4, Alabama the 5, Tennessee the 8. So 4 of the top 10 teams in the country are in the SEC. Then you go to A&M, who's 14, who just knocked off Auburn this week, Kentucky 15, and Missouri 21. So the SEC is really going to be a great seeded. It's going to when we start to talk about props, when we get to the props, and you're going to get on that STN Sports app, and it's just going to be loaded up with props. But maybe it's SEC wins versus Big Ten wins, or SEC will an SEC team win the tournament? So you're getting
how many
all
wins
of those
will they
teams.
have combined in the tournament?
There's going to be so much stuff that's
right.
going on here. But in a team that I'm watching is specifically Houston. Houston's always been a good team, playing in the AAC. And they never had that competition level, and they would get to the tournament and they'd always be a top seed, but they'd always find a way to lose to an inferior team. But now you've run through the gauntlet of the Big 12, where you're being tested in every single game, and I think that has maybe made Houston better and more aware of playing those back-to-backs and playing a tougher team every night, which I think will suit them well as they go into not only conference tournament play, but we go into NCAA tournament play.
We talk about the SEC, too. I mean, they're all so good, but you think about Bama. I mean, from an offensive side of it, they can score with anybody in the country. It's just, can they play enough defense to win some of these games when you get to tournament time? And I think I'm going to lead in with that is to last man standing. It's our college basketball tournament contest. It's a $50,000 guaranteed aggregate payout. But I think that's what makes this year's contest so much fun. When you look at so many schools, and we've talked about it the last couple of years, that you've got some of these smaller schools that have kids that have been there, 3 or 4 years, or kids that have transferred in, and now that you have that 5th or 6th year of eligibility, and they can compete with the big boys. 5-10 years ago, you saw so many games, 20-point favorites or greater on that Thursday, Friday. You just don't see that anymore. It's much more competitive, and I think that's what makes the last man standing contest so much fun. It's really doing your homework, looking at it, and we lost a close friend of Station Casinos and Jay and I several years ago, and Brian Blessing, and he used to always use this phrase when it came to last man standing for that $25 entry fee. Matchsticks to lumber yards, because you can make a killing in this contest. $25 gets you one entry, $100 gets you 4 entries, and a bonus one free. You have to get the 4 to get that bonus one, because you really have a chance to have some fun in this tournament. We've started taking applications now. That first Thursday, you can sign up all the way to 6 o'clock, although the schedule will be limited. You still have a few games, so if you haven't gotten signed up yet, get signed up for Last Man Standing. Again, $50,000 aggregate payout guaranteed.
Yeah, and if you haven't played Last Man Standing, or you wonder kind of what we're talking about from a contest standpoint, it starts on that Thursday, March 20th. The play-in games don't count. You're going for $25. Again, Chucky talked about how you can get up to 5 entries. You're going to pick one winner on Thursday against the point spread. If you win that game, you're going to advance to Friday.
And you can use the same team throughout if you want. You're not eliminated if you use the same team.
And all you're doing is picking a winner on Thursday. If you had 5 entries, you could pick the same team 5 times. You could pick 5 different teams. If any one of those that win, you advance to Friday. Do the same thing on Friday. Pick a winner. You advance to Saturday, and so on to Sunday. You've got to come in and make your picks every day. So that first weekend, you make a pick on Friday, you make a pick on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and then you got to come back in the next week to pick it on that following Thursday of games. But it's absolutely fantastic. If you're going to be in town throughout the tournament, Last Man Standing is the contest for you. You win and advance and be that last man standing, take home that coveted $50,000 prize.
And even just being in the books during that time of year, it is so much fun just watching the crowds and listening to them. And when you have those big matchups and you have a smaller school that really is competing with the big boys, people realize maybe my team's not going to cover right now, and that David against Goliath story becomes magnified. And just the sounds in the book and the crowd and the atmosphere, it is fun. I know so many guys have kind of contacted me, and so many guests, that this is our vacation. We come out here every year for those first 4 days, make sure I have my seats, because this is what it's all about, and it's going to be fun again this year. And I think it's wide open. We've talked about Houston and Duke and some of the teams in the SEC at the top, but I think you can go a good 15 to 18 teams this year that really kind of open it up to make it interesting. And again, some of these small schools might have something to say about that as well.
Yeah, and the other thing about that March Madness 20, that first weekend, is it's a long day. Games start at 9, 10 in the morning.
Oh, we know.
The last games are going to go off in that 6:50 time frame. And so one of the key things to do is make sure you have the STN Sports app. If you don't have the app, there's no better time than this week to get yourself signed up.
And what do you get if you haven't signed up yet?
We've got a $50 no-worry wager in there for you. We've got a free charger if you put in $50 to sign up. Again, the app is going to be loaded up with so many props on these games. Team to score the first 10 points, team to score the first 20 points, 3-pointers made, props on all the players, live in-play wagering during the game. So if the game's not going the way you planned it, you can find a way to bet the other side, get off the game, double up. There's so many different things you can do. So get yourself prepared this week. Sign up, get the STN Sports app.
And baseball starts next week, and on Monday going into Tuesday and Tuesday going into Wednesday, two very public teams, the Dodgers and Cubs, play. And if you find yourself up at that point, the app's still going to be open. There's going to be a lot of in-play wagers and things like that as well.
Yeah, 3:10 a.m. on the 18th. So Monday night the 17th, Tuesday morning the 18th. Cubs Dodgers at 3:10 a.m. Then the following morning again at 3:10 a.m. We will be open 24 hours. The app will stay open. You can get your live in-play on that Cubs Dodgers game. And again, the guys are working on them right now. There'll be a ton of props on the game. We can have some fun in those overnight hours.
So if you're a golf fan, the Players Championship is going on this weekend, and a ton of props are up with that. And of course, gentlemen, start your engines. Las Vegas 400 is going on if you're a NASCAR fan as well. So there's so many props and so many different ways to bet all this stuff, and it's a busy time. It's a fun time for us. All this stuff is going on as we kind of lead into the big dance and tournament play. But get signed up for STN Sports now. As Jay mentioned, the Charger, the $50 no-worry wager, just a fun time to have the app because it really does bring the sportsbook to you.
And we haven't even mentioned the NBA or the NHL. Again, playoff races are going on there, and everybody's trying to solidify their spot. So, again, what a great time of year to be in the sportsbook, and a great time of year to get that STN Sports app and be in the action every day.
If you're going to come out to one of the books, though, to watch during the tournament, I advise get here early, grab one of the seats in the general sports seating area, because if you can't be at one of these sites to watch any of these games, there's not a better place to be in one of our sports books. Just the atmosphere and the crowd and the noise, it really is contagious throughout the casino, and it's so much fun. And again, it's one of the times of year that we love, and we know you guys do as well. So we look forward to seeing you guys. Don't forget to get signed up for STN Sports. And for Jason, I'm Chucky, and for STN Sports, we're excited that it's tournament time and so much is going on. So good luck, and we'll be giving you guys updates throughout the tournament. Don't forget to get signed up for Last Man Standing, and we will see you guys for some updates during the tournament. Thanks and good luck.
Let's do one super quick up to 50 no worry